Hey everybody, welcome back to It's a Metal Thing. Today, steering. Put the steering in this bad boy. Let's do it. All right, so one of the determining factors on, or part of the determining factor on the engine placement is gonna be where the axle lands in the steering, whatever. I put my axle together, stuck it up underneath there. I'm gonna need a steering arm. Trying to find one online, but I couldn't find one that I wanted to use. So I'm gonna do the tie rod on the rear of the spindle in the lower position, and I want to do the steering part on the top arm, top of the spindle. The problem is the arm that you get for the tie rod isn't deep enough. I've seen people use these on the top and they use a spacer, but there's no need for that if you can build your own, which I'm gonna do. So I need to extend that upper arm out for the camber, because the camber on this, this is obviously deeper than this. This one fits on here, but I'm gonna make a longer hoop over here. Plus two, I'm gonna make it straight since it's coming out. I'm just gonna come off here straight, come off of this straight. It'll put it pretty much in line with this added depth here. And since this angle's out, it should end up pretty close to the same position here. I'm gonna make it the same length. It's the same length as my steering arm, just to keep everything all equal and uniform. So I'm going to actually just cut that out. I could probably go down and have somebody draw it up and have it laser cut or water jet, but why would I do that when I have a cutting torch over there? So I'm gonna cut this out, grind it all up, machine the surfaces, do all the machine work, and make an arm for the top. So I'm gonna do that right now. All right, my buddy capped the hole first. I located this hole first, because once this is made, once this is cut out, the bottom piece, it's not gonna be any really good place to grab, because all the angles will be similar to this. There's not really a good place to grab to drill and tap that hole. So I'm going to, this is about where I want it. This is the distance I'm gonna go off, and it's got kind of flesh here, but that's all right. So I'm just gonna draw a line straight. I'm gonna end up, I want the same kind of bulbous end because it looks more manufactured and a little less homemade. And I'll do the same, come over here, and I'm just gonna leave these long. So yeah, I'm gonna draw here some soapstone and cut it with my torch, which I haven't used in a minute. So most of the cutting I do is with my plasma, and I could probably cut this with plasma, but it would take forever, and it can get off. I think the straighter, nicer cut is gonna be with the torch. At least I hope so. So we'll find out here in a minute. Ugly, pretty ugly. But it's plenty big. I can, I'll be able to massage it, make it look factory. I'm a good welder. I'm a crappy fire cutter. Just never do it. And I'm an exceptional grinder though. So I'm gonna grind this thing up and make it look really good. You'll be surprised. So that's coming up. All right, done up, ground up, milled up, machined up. I have to make a relief on this side like this over here, where they machine the back of the spindle. There's like a little cutout on the back to get away from the radius of the casting right in here. So I'm gonna do that same thing over here, and then I'll be able to bolt it up. I have interference obviously with the spring here. With this piece of flat bar sitting on here, you can see this needs to come up considerably. It's gonna go down as it swings. So I need to come up, I don't know, 3/4 of an inch maybe. I've made this arm probably 3 different times. It's getting close. I'm gonna put a brake in here, break this up, and then break this down to bring this mounting position up. My only concern is it's gonna shorten the throw on this and make the steering a little quicker. I'm not sure if that's gonna be an issue yet. If I have to, I'll go ahead and just mutilate this one, or at least not worry about it. So just to get the height that I need, and then I can work on making a new one. Another issue too is I'm not sure how far this comes back, if it's gonna get back here. I don't know. I haven't built one of these before, so I don't know. Another thing I wanna do is move the axle back. I like the altered wheelbase situation. I like how far out it was. It's a little on the long side, but it would be okay. I have room to move this back an inch on this side without even worrying about it a little bit. I'm gonna have to do some massaging on this bracket here to get it to come back. I need to maybe cut this off a little bit or cut it at an angle so it matches that so I can weld it to that. It'll be plenty strong. That won't be an issue. But I need some room in the front. I want to run an intercooler on the front, and I want to run the piping around the front, just underneath the frame rail there. Or if I can cut the frame rail off, I'll just come tuck it underneath here and go in here. So either way, I'd like to have a little bit more room in the front for intercooler piping. So that'll help some. It's not going to alleviate the whole issue, but it'll help some. Another thing I need to do is this tie rod is a little short for me. It's a little too much thread showing. So these Heim joints on here are a little more misalignment. They have a little tall shoulder or a little shoulder on the side just to help with misalignment. I think it'll work better for the steering arm. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna take this off. I'll put that in a lathe. I'll cut that weld. I'll get that bung out. And I'll use this for the steering arm. I'll make a new tie rod for the lower arm for the tie rod. So I can make it a little bit longer, and then I can reuse this one, just make it a little shorter, cut a little piece out, because that chromoly ain't cheap, baby. Chromoly ain't cheap. So first things first, I got the weight off of it. Should just roll back. I'll move that one back as far as I can, take some measurements, and then cut that bracket on the other side. Once I get that tacked in, I can put the weight back on it and then start going on the steering. So that's next. Spring purchaser moved back. Got this one back to touching the frame there. Had to notch the other one. Cut the back side of the other one to match the frame. But there's plenty of room there, it'll work. Actually more weld on there than the other one. I haven't clamped it down yet. I need to get that steering arm off. But what I did was I plumbed off the bolt to the front bolt on the rear springs. Hopefully that's close. I mean, otherwise the springs are wrong, which, you know, it is what it is. But I'll probably, before I nail everything down, just go from center pin to center pin just to double check. I'm gonna take this arm off now, put some bends in it, try to put some bends in it. I will put some bends in it, just no matter how hard it's gonna be. But I gotta take the tire off, the brakes off, and unbolt that. My buddy's got it pressed down there. I'm gonna see if I can press it. I might have to heat it, but we'll see. So that's next. It worked. That press is new. He had an old one we were used forever. It was a little hand drive job, but he did a powered one, so it's totally different. I really haven't had a chance to play with it, but it bent this it didn't really want to do it, but it did it. I messed up the threads on this, pulled the threads a little too close. Maybe next time yeah, I have to build a new one. I forgot that I had welded these holes up and tapped them. This is cut at an angle to compensate for the camber. With this 2.5 inch axle, there's really no room for this to go straight out with the arm or with the spindle. So I needed it to offset so it was running parallel when I steered it. You can see it's parallel, but barely, I mean, there's barely any room there. It's like literally like an 1/8 inch or maybe 3/16 of an inch. But when it turns, it travels parallel to the axle. So yeah, it's square with the world instead of square with the spindle. So I'm going to have to make a new arm anyway because I don't feel comfortable with these welded up and re-drilled and tapped holes. I'm overbuilding this thing. I know a lot of people are thinking it's overkill, but better safe than sorry. Plus I jacked up these threads a little bit, pulled these threads a little bit, but I'm going to, I need some hardware, so I'm gonna go get some 5/8 fine thread. I'll probably run a tap through here just to get it to work. I'll try to get the steering set up and see if this angle will work. See if I gotta angle it some more and see if the length is all right. So I'm just gonna use this as a test mule for the final product. I'm not super worried about all these gnarly bends in here, but yeah, so I'm gonna run to the hardware store, get some bolts and get going on the steering part. All right, before I work on that steering, I had to get a steering arm. So I'm gonna take this tie rod, which is a little short. That's too much thread showing there, at least a 1/2 inch. I'll probably go 3/4 of an inch longer on this one. Get a little more thread engagement. This end is marginal. It's probably about right. I know I have full thread engagement here, but you know, if I can get it tidy and right, I'd rather have that. So I'm gonna probably make it about 3/4 of an inch longer. So another reason too I wanna use these Heim joints is they're a little misalignment style. They're a bit taller, have more clearance for what's gonna happen on the steering, right? One side's gonna go one way, the other side's gonna go the other way. And there's gonna be some weird, you know, interaction between the two where the tie rod ones just go parallel, pretty much parallel with each other. There's a little bit of rock, but not nearly what it's gonna be on the steering. So I'm gonna cut these, I'm gonna take these out, I'm gonna cut this one off, then I'll be able to make the steering arm out of this one considerably shorter. But before I can do all that, I need to get these tied back together. So I need to make a new steering arm. So I'm gonna do that next, or a new tie rod, sorry. 40 3/4. I measured the other one was 40 inches, added 3/4 of this. I only tacked the ends on this time, in case it's too long, too short. The other one was too short. There's nothing I could have done about it. So it didn't matter if I was welded on, but it would have been easier to convert to the steering arm. I ran a tap, 5/8 fine thread tap down through there just to clean up the hole because it got distorted from the metal. I'm gonna bolt this on. I'm going to put the tie rod on. I'm going to align the front end as close as I can, which should be, you know, close enough. And then see where I'm at on the tie rod length, make sure it's good. I might pull it off and weld it up. And then I'll get started on the steering. Steering box mount. I made this back when I was putting the engine in to get the steering box where it needed to go, obviously. I had to machine out this surface here. I went with a thicker piece of steel so I could have a little bit of meat here. This is 3/8 of an inch about. The body of the steering box sticks proud of the mounting points. When you buy a mount for this particular box, it's just like a triangle shape with these 3 hole placements, and it has little standoffs, tubing standoffs. That wasn't gonna work for me. So I just made this big piece. I can clamp it to the frame. I can move it around, get it where it needs to be. Once it's where it needs to go and I'm happy with it, I'll just scribe on here. I'll cut it off and try to sexy it up a little bit. Also too, I'm running Allen bolts. This is gonna hit the frame, this hole here. So rather than use a regular hex head, this is oversized, but rather than use a hex head and a washer and have a big giant hole in the frame, I'm gonna try to keep it as small as I can so I can get an Allen in there. It'd be better than trying to run a hex head with for the socket to go around. So I'm gonna stick it up in here, clamp it, and move it around and get it where it needs to go and see where I'm at on that steering shaft. So that's next. Steering box triple clamped. I have it sitting in here. It's close. It might be a little low, maybe. I pulled a string on both sides. I have the string on here and I pulled it back to check the straightness. So I have a string on both sides, just kind of referenced a little bit loosely off those tires there. I have this piece of angle iron sitting on top of the steering shaft here. Where's it at? Oh, in the way. Sitting on top of the steering shaft here. It's sitting on the top of the steering shaft down there. There's clearance between here and here. I'm pretty happy with it. I think it'll be all right. I'm going to hold that heim joint up, mark the tube, cut it, and tack it in. Trying to get a little bit of thread. I think it's pretty close to where it needs to be. I'm gonna do that next. All right, steering box is close, right where it is. It's angling uphill a little bit toward the steering shaft coming out of the firewall, which is fine. If anything, I'm going to make it a little more level. The only problem that I have with that is this steering arm that I bought from Speedway. It's a 2-inch drop. It's gonna be too much. It's already too much now, so I need to take some of the drop out. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna heat it up. I'm gonna straighten it out a little bit, kind of get it close to where I need. Pete and Jake's makes a 1-inch drop. I'll probably go with that. When I drilled this hole out, I drilled it too big and it's sloppy. So no matter what, I was just gonna throw this away, but I'm gonna use it now for mock-up purposes. So I'm gonna get after it with a torch. I'm gonna heat here. Rather than put it in the press and cold press it like I did before, and I don't wanna distort these holes, so I'm gonna heat them up, just bend it and try to straighten out and get it close to 1 inch. See where we're at. Steering update. So I had the box all the way up where it needed to be, close to where it needed to be. The snout right here where the U-joint mounts goes literally right between the alternator and the oil filter. There was just enough room. Literally, like I could just barely get it off, which was okay, but it was only like an 1/8 inch from the back of the alternator where it kicked up. So it came out, the U-joint kicked up, it was like right up against the back of what would be the alternator. I'm using the oil filter as a display, and it was like literally like an 1/8 inch there. So what I really want to do is bring everything out a little bit. I can't go back anymore with this. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna build a little extension off of here. I got a 5/8 36 spline coupler right here with a 3/4 smooth backside. And I also bought a double D to double D U-joint. And then I also bought a new arm. That arm is not gonna work. Well, it was never gonna work. But the 1 inch drop is even still too much. So this flat arm is gonna be the one. So I'm going to make a little extension here. I'll show you what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna take some double D, I'm gonna weld it in there. Gonna pin that, something I can put this double D. And what that will do is it'll move where the U-joint lands. So it'll be back farther. So when it starts to flex there, it'll clear the back of the alternator a little bit better. I have plenty of room between the bottom of the shaft and the motor mount. So I'm going to get all that made up and put it together and see what it looks like. Here's the plan. I have this, it's 5/8 36 spline into a 3/4 smooth 2 inch long coupler. I'm going to bury this in here. I'm going to have it, the D horizontal. This will be at the top of the steering box. The shaft coming out of the steering wheel is at this angle. So I'm gonna keep all the U-joints phased. Gonna weld this up. I'll drill a hole and put a roll pin in there just for extra safety. And then I'll cut the length that I need to get this on. And then we should be good to go. It'll bring me out the depth that I need to come out to clear the back of the alternator. And I think it'll be plenty of room below for the steering shaft in motor mount. So I'm gonna weld this up and cut it all up. Extender done. I left it long. I can always cut it off. I'm gonna just put it up right there and see what it looks like. I drilled a hole, put a 3/16 roll pin in there for a little extra added insurance. Got my new arm on. So now I'm gonna stick this thing up right there and wrestle around with it. It weighs a freaking ton. I got a floor jack, trying to get it all lined up and everything and where I want it and clamp it all at the same time. It's kind of a shit show. So I'm gonna get all that up in there and see where we're at. All right, pretty happy with that. The bolt there barely clears. I can get the oil filter off if I just crank the wheel one way or the other and get that arm out of the way. There's a 1/4 inch between or more than a quarter. There's like a 1/2 inch between the shaft and the back of the alternator now, and it's really close on the motor mount. So when I'm gonna mark this thing up, I'm gonna take it out. I'm gonna take like a 1/2 inch off of that shaft. That should bring it around. Also too, oh man, look out. Fat man standing up. Also too, it's really close here, but it's not really hitting. I think I'm gonna make this a collapsible column a little bit so I can cut the D tube to here and have the shaft be there. That'll give me 1/8 inch more clearance on that, but I'll worry about that at the very end. But I'm gonna take this all out. First I'm gonna mark it. Describe the back of the steel here, put a couple marks on the frame. I'll cut the top drop off, and then I'll test fit it again because I need to mark the hole for the top mounting bolt. This one here. I'm gonna have to go through the frame, so I'll have to run a tube through the frame so I can bolt that from the backside with that Allen head bolt that I have. So I'm just gonna go ahead and cut this off. I'm gonna put some lines on here, do what I want to do to that extension, put it back up here one last time, get it all exactly where I want it. Then I'll mark that hole, take it down, drill it, do what I gotta do to facilitate that, and then put it back on. All trimmed up, cut a 1/2 inch off of here, cut this off. I trimmed this a little bit, sexied it up with the CAD. Still a big chunk of steel, but not as bad as it was. So now I'm gonna get it all back up in there, get it where I think it needs to be. I'll center punch this hole and then take it out and make provisions for me to be able to bolt through the frame with that. Axle is done for now. It's all tacked in, it's all where it needs to be. I'm gonna just double check some measurements before I final weld everything, obviously. But the drag link is parallel with the axle, so no bump steer. There's good clearance between the drag link and the spring. I'm going to remake this arm later. I'm happy with the way the steering is. The springs are right. They've got the good length on them. They're gonna have good travel. Happy with where the front shackles are. The steering box I just tacked in. I didn't do this hole yet. I wanted to run it through the travel. I wanted to just get it to steer a full lock to lock just to see where I was at before I nailed this down. The only problem that I'm having is the nut or the bolt on the steering and the oil filter are really close, like an 1/8 inch. But I can, when I cut this loose and put it in for the final time, I'll put just a couple of degrees of angle in there. On this original line that was on here, you can see it is angled down a little bit. So I'll do that. That'll fix that problem. Give me an 1/8 inch there. The shafts are good. Everything turns good. Got about an 1/8 inch here. I think what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna do like a semi-collapsible steering shaft. I'll cut this tube here. I'll run the D shaft up into here, give myself about 3 inches between where it's gonna bottom out. When I do that, they'll give me the extra 1/8 inch that I need for extra clearance on there. So that'll be good. It steers good. I mean, it runs through the travel. I'm happy with it. So yeah, I'm going to end this video here. I've never built a straight axle car before. It looks right to me. It feels right to me. I'm not 100% sure. You see anything that really like jumps out at you and says, whoa, no, give me a comment. So yeah, I'm happy. Big milestone. So yeah, roll cage next. I know I said that in the last video, but the springs came in and everything was just coming together on that front end. So I just went ahead and got it. Plus it was easier to roll around. You know, been up on the cart underneath for a while. So now I can move it in and out and get to the anchors on the floor for the tubing bender. So that's gonna be next, but that's it. So if you like the video, subscribe, check me out on Instagram, it's a metal thing, and I'll see you on the next one.